Welcome back, everybody. This is going to be a good week. Yeah, this week we don't have anybody that's going to be on the podcast. You're just going to listen to me, which is fine. Things happen in the mining industry. I always have like 4 to 5 people lined up, and then things happen in the industry and people get busy and they have their busy lives. Yes, they will be back on the show. But yeah, some weeks it's just not possible to have somebody on the show. But today, we're going to talk about a topic that's very close to my heart, and that's about having a performance discussion, that tough conversation with somebody. And I know that you know that this is tough. If you've been in the game and you lead a team of people, and there's always somebody that needs to have a performance discussion, and that's just the way it is in mining. And today we're going to talk about that. And how do you have a proper conversation that's going to be beneficial to both parties, to yourself and the individual that you're having the conversation with. But more importantly, is there's a win for the organization, or there's a win for the rest of the team that comes out of that conversation. Excuse me. So having a performance discussion is part of business, and things don't always go well. And today we're going to touch on that. So I'm just going to give you the quick outline. So it's not going to be a long podcast. So we're going to talk about what are the principles that govern how you have this conversation. And then we'll go into the conversation itself, and we'll follow the hamburger approach. And then we're going to wrap it up. Very simple. It's a very simple process. Now, if you've been like me, that have had the wrong sort of engagements and the wrong principles being followed, then some of you listening to this would say, well, Christo, you never spoke to me like that. You never followed these principles. And you're absolutely right, because I didn't always get it right. And it's an ongoing process of learning, and it's an ongoing process of development. And I would say only probably the last 5 years that I really get it down to a much better conversation, where the value of this member of your team is the primary driver. So let's get into this, and let's have a conversation about having a performance conversation. All right, so it's normal in business and in life. Things happen where you have to express your dissatisfaction with a member of your team that is either not performing or things have gone wrong, and there needs to be a conversation that takes place. So what are the principles that drive this process? It's actually very simple. And a lot of the things that I will share with you is from collective learning. There's very little, or there are a few new things in life in terms of leadership. They are the same principles, just spoken with different stories, but different backgrounds. And mine is also exactly the same. So it's nothing different from what you read in leadership books and when you speak to leadership gurus on this subject. So I think the most important thing about a guiding principle when having a performance conversation, and it's one that I really had to dig deep in myself to figure out if I really do care about the individual that I'm going to have the conversation with. And that's the starting point. If it's going to be about you, and it's about you not looking good, and your ego, and all about your reputation, well, guess what? You're not going to have the right principles driving the conversation, because the individual that you will have the conversation with will quickly pick it up. So you have to really ask yourself, do I deeply care about this individual? Is this about him or her? And am I really having this conversation because I deeply care for him or her? That's the starting point. And I have had to deal with this in my own personal capacity, say, why do I want to have this conversation? And it really comes back to caring for people. So when you start off this conversation, you know that you do not want to belittle the person. You don't want to make things personal. You don't want to climb into the character of the person. It's a deep sense of love. It's a deep sense of caring for this individual. And that's why you want to have the conversation. You want the best for them, not for yourself, not for the organization. You want the best outcome for them. That's the primary driving force. All right, a few other principles. You cannot have this conversation when you're emotional. So at times when things are really, really tough and in the business and it's in the heat of the moment, it's very easy to go off on a tangent and have that conversation there and then when you're quite emotional. That's the wrong time to have it. You have to plan for a performance conversation. You have to be in the right state of mind where you're doing it out of love and care, and you need to have your emotions well under control. The other thing that's very important is that you have to have it in a room where it's private. It's only the two of you. There's nothing worse, and I've done this many times, and I regret every time I've done this, and it has never been a good outcome. When you take somebody on having a performance discussion in front of other people, that's just not the way it happens. That's just not the way that you build a person up and help them becoming the best version of themselves. So that's very simple. So plan for the conversation, know where you're coming from a sense of love, be in the right emotional set of mind, and then plan the conversation that it's in private. Okay. The final thing on having this conversation is do it as soon as possible. Don't let weeks go by when you want to have this conversation, because the intent and the purpose and the dynamics of the conversation just gets lost over time. And we all know how it is. And I've been one of those people that have been delaying conversations, and then you end up just never having one. And it's because it was always awkward for me. It was always difficult. And actually to get around going into that conversation was always very difficult for me. And it has become a lot better. So have it as soon as possible, within a day or two, preferably the same day if you can get the timing right. Okay, so now you've planned the conversation, you're in the right state of mind, you've let the person know that you can have the conversation, and now it gets to, well, in the next hour, you're going to have this conversation. So here's how I do it, and it really works well for me, and maybe this will work also for you. So I'll follow what we call the hamburger approach. Very simple. You start with a positive first, and then you deal with a meaty, not so nice conversation in the middle, but then you end the conversation on a positive note as well. So yeah, so the two pieces of bread with an uncomfortable piece of meat in between, and the principle that drives that is it's from a point of love and it's a point of care. If you care for a person, you'll put them at ease right in the beginning. You'll have the difficult portion of the conversation in the middle, but you will let them feel at the end of the conversation that it's all about caring for them. It's all about their growth. It's all about being the best version of themselves for them, that you really deeply care about them and you value them. And that's the hamburger approach. So in preparing for this performance conversation, think about authentically, really, what do you value about this person? And what are their strengths? And what are they really good at? And make sure you start the conversation by just being authentically thankful and grateful for what this person brings into the team, or has taught you, or the value that this person brings into the organization, and make sure you set the conversation right from the beginning, that they know that you deeply care about them. Then you can transition into the portion where, look, Christine, and I'm saying Christine because my mom's name is Christine. Christine, this is going to be not so easy for me. Is now we're getting into a portion of the conversation where we're going to talk about something that has not been good for the organization and for us as a team, and it's the tough portion of the conversation. But I really want to understand from your point of view the following. And then you mention the example. You can explain the situation, you can explain what happened, and then ask them questions about how did they see it? How do they reflect from now that it has happened? What was their point of view? Try and understand their point of view by asking questions, not just telling them you didn't like or you didn't appreciate that, but really ask their perspective. So it comes back to planning. When you're going to have this conversation, you need to know that when it gets to the meaty part of the conversation, the difficult part, you need to ask questions that will be able to give you the perspective and the lenses that this individual is looking at life. Right. So the person will explain and you'll get more understanding. And then you can get into the bit where you explain from your point of view and from the organization how this situation is a lose-lose. And why is it important to see a behavior change or to rectify the matter? And once again, it's from a point of love and a point of deep care. Now, you can then transition into agreeing on an action plan of what will change. And in most cases, the person will in any event commit to making a change and making an adjustment in how they speak to people, or the performance, or whatever that needs growth and development for the individual. And then make sure you end the conversation well and on a positive note. Remember, people will not always remember exactly what you said, but they will remember how you made them feel. And it's important that you make them feel valued, and you must be honest. You have to have this conversation with yourself before the time, in really knowing that you know that you value this person. And if you don't, then you have to do that introspection a lot more deeper before you have this conversation. So that's the nuts and the bolts of it. Very short, very simple today. Make sure that you deeply care for people and that they know it. And you care enough for them that you will rather have a conversation that's going to be to their benefit, their career, their life, than not having that conversation. It's really like looking, if you've got children like I do, and my son, when he was small, he was a very busy young man, and he was very energetic, and you would never say to him, don't touch that. You would rather say, you can touch that, but it's going to burn you. And that's just the way we had to interact with him. So, but when it came to a point where he was really didn't think, and we could see he wasn't paying attention, we would rather grab him and pulling him away from that hazard. And sometimes you have to just do that with people. You have to just pull them away from in a situation that's going to hurt them. And they may not realize it at the time, that it's from a deep sense of love and care. But if you really do care for people, if you really do love them, and you really want to help them as a leader, you will have that intervention. You will talk to them, and you will have a conversation that will make it better for them going forward. Well, I hope this was helpful for you, and I trust that you do enjoy this podcast. And please give us feedback. We need to know what we're doing well and what we can improve. And you can visit us on www.theminingcoach.com. You can also reach out to me. And thank you for listening this week. Thank you for paying attention and making a difference and adding value to people. Have a great rest of your week. Cheers.